Okay, welcome everybody to this meeting of the Leicestershire Safer Communities Strategy Board. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Ewan Walters. I work in Democratic Services at Leicestershire County Council and I do the administration for this board. I think we're going to do some full introductions later on in the agenda, but we have received some apologies, which I'll just go through quickly. We've had Victoria Charlton, Edwina Grant, Lee Harper-Davies, Carl Bowden, Rachel Burgess, Sarah Pickering and Simon Wellband. Now, the first agenda item is to appoint a chair. So I'll just quickly run through who is able to vote on this. So we've got the Leicestershire County Council Cabinet League member for community safety. You've got the all the CSP chairs are able to vote. We've got a representative from Rutland. I don't think there's anybody on the line or anybody from the City Council. A representative from Leicestershire Police is able to vote. The Police and Crime Commissioner is able to vote. And then somebody from the Fire and Rescue Service is able to vote. And also somebody from the Fire Authority is able to vote. And we've now got Neil Bannister, who's the Fire Authority representative on this board. Somebody from the CCG is able to vote. A Probation Service representative is able to vote. A representative from Public Health and a representative from the County Council, Assistant Director, Education and Early Help. That's normally Chris Thomas. Okay, so are there any nominations for a chair of this board for this coming year? Does anybody want to nominate somebody to chair?
Better be a county councillor, shouldn't it?
Well, it is open to all board members. So does somebody want to nominate? Yep, Mr. Lloydell. You're on mute, Mr. Lloydell.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, okay. I nominate Mrs. Deborah Taylor if she's interested in taking the post.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder for Mrs. Taylor?
I'm happy to second that.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations? No. Okay. Everybody happy with Mrs. Taylor as chair?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. So, Mrs. Deborah Taylor, you're elected as chair of the Safer Community Strategy Board for 2021-22, and I'll hand over to you for the rest of the meeting. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you for everyone's support. So we'll move on to item 2, election of a deputy chairman. Is there any nominations for deputy chairman? Liz?
I haven't spoken to the person concerned, and so I don't know whether he would be willing to, but I would be delighted if Councillor Bannister would take up the vice chairmanship.
I'm happy to second that if he's happy.
I am. I was going to mention this under declarations of interest because I should declare, and the board should be aware. If it does want me as its deputy chairman, I am employed by the Crown Prosecution Service as a senior Crown prosecutor and Crown advocate. I don't know if that is going to be an issue at all. If the board is satisfied that it won't be, and that it might help inform some of my contributions to the board, then I'm content to take on the role of vice chairman, deputy chairman, sorry.
Yeah, I don't see that being as a problem generally. I don't think there may be some particular agenda items which you may have to withdraw from as the year progresses, but generally I don't see that as a problem. So,
thank you, Ewan.
If I may, Ewan and Chair, through the Chair, actually I would suspect and anticipate, Neil, that your vast knowledge of the criminal justice system would actually be hugely beneficial.
Well, you're very kind, Les. There may be a debate about how vast that knowledge is, but I'd like to think I've got a bit of an inside track.
Okay, we all happy with Neil as deputy chairman? Yeah. Brilliant. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on to introductions because I know there's a few new people, so I'll work down my list. So I'm Deborah Taylor. I'm the lead member for Children, Families, Community Safety and Regulatory Services at Leicestershire County Council. Move down, Andrew Woodman.
Andrew Woodman, CSP Chair for North West Leicestershire.
Bob Bean.
Morning, everyone. I'm Bob Bean. I'm head of the probation service for Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland.
Malaise.
Mally's Graham. I'm the Community Safety Partnership Chair for Melton Borough Council.
Ewan's already introduced himself. Grace.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Grace Strong. I'm the Director of the Local Violence Reduction Network.
Gurjit.
Morning, everybody. Gurjit Samurai, Community Safety Manager at Leicestershire County Council.
Paul.
Hi, I'm Paul Cott. I'm the Community Safety Team Leader for North West Leicestershire District Council, and I'm here to represent Paul Sanders, who's the Head of Communities.
Sorry, I meant the other Paul, but that's fine. Paul Heinsohn.
Sorry.
I should have said the surname.
Paul Heinsohn, I'm the Chief Exec of the OPCC.
John Richardson.
Morning all, John Richardson, Strategic Director at Blaby District Council. Morning all.
Joshna.
Morning all, I'm Joshna Mavji, Consultant in Public Health at Leicestershire County Council.
Kevin.
I'm Councillor Kevin Lloydell, Community Safety Partnership Chair for the Oby Wixton Borough Council. Thank you.
William.
Hi, it's Bill Knopp. I'm the Regional Prevent Coordinator for Counter-Terrorism Policing in the East Midlands.
Les.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Councillor Les Fillimore, Blaby District Council, and I co-chair the Blaby District Hinckley and Bosworth CSP. Thank you.
Mark.
Yep, good morning, everybody. Mark Smith, Community Safety and Youth Officer for Oby and Wixton Borough Council.
Rupert.
Hi, Rupert Matthews. I'm the Police and Crime Commissioner for Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland.
Neil.
Hi, Neil Bannister, County Councillor for the Broughton Astley Division, and I'm here as the representative of the Combined Fire Authority.
Rachel.
Morning all, I'm Rachel Burgess, Community Safety Manager at Hinckley and Bosworth Borough Council, and this morning I'm standing in for our Director of Community Services, Sharon Stacey.
Carol.
Hello everybody, Carol Richardson. I'm a Safeguarding Manager with Leicester City CCG and I'm standing in for Rachel Garton.
Rick.
Morning everybody, Rick Basra, Community Safety Coordinator at Leicestershire County Council.
Julie.
Morning all, Julie Robinson, Head of Neighbourhood Services at Chelmsford Borough Council.
Jonathan.
Morning Chair, good morning everybody. I'm Johnny Starbuck, Head of 24/7 Local Policing, Leicestershire Police and Deputy to Adam Streets.
Adam.
Yeah, good morning all. Adam Streets, Chief Superintendent with Leicestershire Police, responsible for local policing across Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland. Good morning.
Thomas.
And I should say, sorry, my camera's playing up today. I'm not being ignorant.
Okay, no worries. Thomas.
Morning everybody, Tom Day, Service Manager for Community Partnerships, Harbour District Council.
Okay, is there anyone else that I've missed that's joined since I started my list? Okay, welcome all, and some new faces and some old ones, so welcome everybody. Okay, we'll move on to the minutes, item 4 minutes of the previous meeting for those of us that were present. Is there anything that anyone wants to pick up on the minutes for accuracy?
Happy to move, Chair.
Thank you. Anyone seconding? It was present.
I'll second, Chair.
Lovely, thank you. Okay, on to item 5, matters arising. Nothing from the minutes from anyone? Okay, thank you. On to item 6, the action log on page 11. I don't know if these numbers are the same for everyone, but page 11 on my pack. There's quite a few greens on here. Do we need to move those greens off now if they're completed? Or do we need to keep them on just to monitor them?
Yeah, we can move the greens off now. That was just to let you know that those actions have been completed. So I'll move them off next time.
Okay. And then we've just got one that's red. Sean's not with us today, number 9, about these cards, these prevent cards, but I think that's a bit past its date now, isn't it? Because we were all going to do that when we were delivering our election leaflets, but it's all a bit past now. So I don't know whether that's worth us carrying on with that.
Yeah, I'll take that one off. That was just to let you know that that one couldn't be completed.
Yeah. Okay. Is there anything else we need to pick up on there? Any of the amber ones anyone wants to update us on? Okay, thank you. We'll move on. On to item 7, declarations of interest. Is there anyone that's got anything to declare on the agenda? Neil? You're still muted, Neil.
I do apologise. As mentioned before, I'm employed by the Crown Prosecution Service in the East Midlands, and as a senior Crown Prosecutor and Crown Advocate, there may be some items which I may not have to participate, but looking at today's agenda, I think I'm all right. But if anything crops up, I will so indicate. Okay,
Ewan, can we just put that on as a standing item for Neil rather than him having to declare? Can we do that for every meeting?
Yeah, we'll put it on as a standing item for every agenda. I'll include it in all the minutes.
That'd be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item 8. As you can see, I've just refocused the agenda a little bit to try and help us manage our time a bit better, because things totally run away with them. Sorry, someone else just put a message on there. Who's that?
It was me, Deborah. It's Paul Heinton. For some reason, I couldn't put my hand up when you were asking about actions, but the action 2 Rick and I have dealt with in relation to the SOG, the Senior Officers Group. We may have been doing
Okay, thanks for that, Paul. Okay, I've just done, like I said, just refocused the agenda a bit. So we're putting the more substantial items on the top there that are required for a decision. Then we'll go on to items that are for discussion, and then the last pieces are just for information, really, just to try and focus the attention of all of us of what we need to be discussing and what's just really for information. So we'll see how it goes. Welcome any feedback with how the agenda's set out, but just want to try and move us forward a little bit more and put some more interesting stuff on there for CSP members and partners to go through, because I just felt the focus of this meeting wasn't really where it should be. So we're work in progress. I'm working with the officers to try and improve it, but any feedback welcome. So we'll move on to the first item, which is the Domestic Abuse Act, and that's being presented by Gurjit, pages 13 to 16. So Gurjit, over to you.
Apologies, forgot to unmute there. Thank you, Chair. So just a bit of a brief background about the Domestic Abuse Act, and then just some information of how we're moving forward in implementing our duty across Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland. So the bill was passed both Houses of Parliament and signed into law 29th of April 2021. So it is now legislation. I don't propose to go through the whole paper, you'll be pleased to know. But if there are any specific questions when I have finished, please do ask me and I'll try my best to answer those. So the definition has now changed to include to make it wider and to include physical, emotional abuse and economic abuse. So coercive control is also in there. The Act recognises that domestic abuse can impact on a child who sees or hears or experiences the effects of abuse. So children are now victims in their own right. Previously, they were classed as witnesses to the abuse, but now they are victims in their own right. On top of page 14, I've put in there some of the new parts of the legislation, what it means, just to pick out a couple of bits. In terms of the domestic abuse protection notices and the new powers for the police, these are going to be tested in a small number of areas. As I understand, I'm sure police colleagues will correct me if I'm wrong, not in Leicestershire. And then there will be national rollout. So we'll be keen to have a look at the experience of other forces and how they're working elsewhere. There is going to be a statutory domestic abuse perpetrator strategy. This act at the moment is is very much about victims and families, so that's where our focus will be. But over the forthcoming year, there will be a domestic abuse perpetrator strategy published. At the moment, we don't know if there will be any funding associated to that, but as soon as we get any news on that, I shall bring that to the board. Clare's Law has also been put on a statutory footing. So this is where people entering new relationships can ask the police to disclose certain information. Obviously, a lot more to it than that, and there's work underway with police colleagues on how that will look for LLR, and it will mean that we'll have to do a lot more work on, you know, when some sort of process for people to ask for that information and then how we respond to that. So again, we'll bring you updates as that develops. So at paragraph 9, in terms of the key issues for partners, the Act places a duty on the Tier 1 local authorities, so that's Leicestershire County Council, to provide accommodation-based support to victims of domestic abuse and their children. So that's in refuges, but also dispersed accommodation, so accommodation around the localities. As you'll be aware, Leicestershire County Council don't actually hold any housing stock. That's more of a duty for districts and boroughs. So we're working very closely with districts and boroughs, and in fact the duty does require Tier 2 local authorities to cooperate with the lead local authority. In terms of that work, there is a multi-agency, oh sorry, I've just lost my place, bear with me a moment. So in order for us to take this work forward, we've set up a county group, and on there are all the districts and boroughs, public health, adult social care, children and families, for a closed part of the meeting. And then we have an open part of the meeting where service providers are invited. And we've done that really because of the legislation around commissioning and tendering rules. But clearly we want to hear from providers because they're the experts and they know the issues better than us. The legislation requires us to pull together a local partnership board. We already have really strong partnership arrangements across Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland. We've got the Domestic Abuse and Sexual Violence Operations Group, chaired at the moment by Matt Ditcher from the police, and that is going to be our board. We will bring on more members because we need the voice of victims and of children on that board. So again, we're looking at who the right people to represent those voices will be, and that board will, rather than creating a new board, we've already got the infrastructure, so we will use that board. We need to provide produce a strategic needs assessment. In terms of the needs assessment, a call for information will be coming out to a number of partners, if not all of you, around in the meeting today. And that will come from Karen Earp at the County Council or from Safe Lives. So the ask really is that when you receive a request for information, please do prioritise that and send that information through as quickly as possible. From the needs assessment, we need to produce a strategy, and that needs to be produced by the end of October. The initial timescale was August, but MHCLG have now extended that, thankfully, to October because the timelines were very tight. Paragraph 11, funding has been allocated from MHCLG. So the County Council has received just over £1 million in each district, and Borough has received approximately 33,000. City and Rutland have also received an amount, and that's really to for the services to provide support for victims. So it's not really for administration type of processes, it's really for that frontline delivery of services. I mentioned the County Act and Funding Group, so that's the partnership group that we've pulled together to take this work forward. And we held a workshop at one of the early meetings to identify any gaps that we're already aware of, the things that we've maybe wanted to fund that we've known have been lacking for the last few years. And the group identified therapeutic support for victims and survivors, dispersed housing need, a need for children's workers, and also need for support for victims with substance misuse issues. So a group of us are taking that work forward to see how we can progress that. MHCLG have stated that if we are aware of gaps, we can fund them through direct awards or the commissioning processes before the needs assessment is published. So we'll be taking that forward. Paragraph 16, the group also identified, so this is more for the districts and boroughs, that the domestic abuse accommodation support officers would be a good way of supporting homelessness, victims of domestic abuse who present as homeless at the locality. North West Leicestershire District Council have had such an officer in post previously, and we're just looking at extending that because the funding was coming to an end. And through the group, district officers have discussed whether we have a almost a standard job description with minimum requirements of the post in that job description, and then each locality can put in other work streams that are required at the locality into that. So again, that work is progressing at the minute as we speak. It is a fast moving piece of work just because of the time scales that we have to adhere to, but the recommendations are that the report is noted. Just on B there, support for the production of the needs assessment, it's as outlined in paragraph 12, not 3.3. And in terms of agree the proposal outlined in paragraph 16 around that collaborative approach towards the district and borough funding and the need for that consistency across the county. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take questions.
Thanks, Gerd. Yeah, I think this is a real key piece of work for us to work all together. So we need to work great in partnership moving this forward. Has every district got their own housing, or is some of them not in Leicestershire?
No. So some have stock, some do not. Some work very closely with registered social landlords. I'm also doing a piece of work around a housing reciprocal, which I will bring to you in the future, and that's very much bringing on board our other social housing providers and private housing landlords.
Okay, so we get a bit of a spread. I'm sort of saying that because really, if you're suffering from domestic abuse and fleeing from it, are you likely to move to another district to be safe, or are you planning to house these people in the districts that their community and their support networks are? I'm just wondering how that works.
It's different for each victim. Some victims may want to leave. They may have networks outside of the district they're currently living in. The issue we have at the minute is that we do have a refuge in Hinckley and in Loughborough, but a lot of the provision, more provision is in the city. We have a real lack of provision of dispersed housing across the county, and this is a real opportunity to build that.
Okay, so are we going to be able to move people across county if we need to then? Is that going to be part of that group that will be able to place people where they need to be, whether they've got connections there or not?
That's the other piece of work that we're looking at when we're looking at the housing reciprocal. So that what that would potentially mean is, say if there was a victim in Harborough and we move them to Charnwood, and Charnwood gave up a house for this victim, Harborough would then owe Charnwood a house. So we're looking, it's based on a pan-London reciprocal. So we're looking at something similar here. But at the minute, what we're looking at is potentially using some of that county council funding to work with domestic abuse providers who would rent housing and put in that support around that property for that victim.
Okay, thank you. Okay, got a couple of hands up. Paul Collett.
Yeah, there is a slight reciprocal already in place. However, I don't think it's official. It's always just been a case of the housing departments help each other out as appropriate. This would just formalise that, I feel.
Okay, that's good. Joshna?
Just wanted to add, I appreciate that the new domestic abuse service won't be live until 1st of April of next year, but in the service specification, we've specifically for the accommodation made a request that we have the dispersed accommodation within that. So we're trying to tie it up with the funding that's come through with the domestic abuse bill. We did the specification and went out to tender before we could finalise the funding for the bill, but there's no reason why we can't then bolt things on further down the line.
Thank you. Les?
Thanks, Chair. I'm just curious. You know, of course, we support anything in this arena. I'm just curious about do we have any handle on how many properties collectively we will actually need available? Because I'm fairly sure we're not all sat on empty housing stock. We're through our own housing stock or partner housing. So I'm just curious what kind of provision, you know, fright and flight happens immediately. You know, scurrying around trying to find a property is always complicated anyway. So have we got any handle at all, Gurjit, on what scale of availability we're going to need?
Unfortunately, I haven't got that to hand this morning, but we will be able to get those figures from, I mean, part of that will be part of the needs assessment, but if we're looking at moving some of this prior to that needs assessment, we will be able to get that information from our providers like Women's Aid, etc. That data is available.
Yeah, and I think if I may, Chair, having some form of foresight and anticipated demand is going to be key critical. You know, how we manage that as vacant stock moving forward is a separate question, but at least we need to know what potentially is coming down the tunnel, so we can work with our partners. Thank you.
I think, Gurjit, so I think we've spoken about this before in this arena, that it's not just, you know, females that need support, it's also males with children and without children. So are we going to be quiet? Because obviously I wouldn't want a woman fleeing domestic violence that's then put in a place with a male there that could be she felt threatening, and vice versa. So I think we need to be aware as well as to what, like Les said, what we need and what sort of male female family without children we need to make sure that we don't cause any more distress to these victims when they're fleeing. So is that sort of going to be part of the needs assessment as well?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, when the government released their it's completely gone my head, but they're going to release information on the Act, and in that they are going to specifically state that the majority of victims are women. That is a fact. However, with dispersed housing, what that means is, because we have units with 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom houses, bigger houses for bigger families, that would be better for male and female victims, because you're not then looking at a refuge accommodation. I mean, it's really complex. I had a meeting with adult social care yesterday. You've got people with physical disabilities who are having to go into, or older people who are having to go into care homes because there is no accommodation for them and they can't stay at home. You know, and if there was better dispersed accommodation with support, they wouldn't have to go into a care home. And you know, there are stories of people then going back home to the abuse because it's better than a care home. So it is very complex, and we will try and unpick that. And I think we've got a bit of an opportunity. We've got the funding for this financial year and next financial year, so it is an opportunity to really look at what the gaps are and what the needs are, and try and move some of this work forward and support some of our really vulnerable communities.
Okay. Okay, I'm sure all partners here will be happy to feed into that and whatever information they can from their areas, and make sure we will work in partnership. Okay, I've got no one else showing, so recommendations, as Gurjit's just gone through, are on page 15, 17, A, B and C, with those slight changes to the reference to the paragraph number. So we all happy to support this going forward? Okay, lovely. Thanks very much, Gurjit. On to item 8, the community trigger review appeal process. I think, Gurjit, you're taking this as well. You're muted still.
Apologies. Yes, I am taking this, and just to let you know, Chair, Sally Johnson is the has been leading this work. It's not Sally's working day, so she has got childcare, but she is going to come on if there's any difficult questions that I can't answer. So okay. If you hear a child in the background, it's she is doing us a favour. Okay, so this paper is very much about a community trigger review process. So it's not about the community trigger itself. It's when there's been a community trigger and then the applicant isn't happy with the response of that community trigger. So a community trigger in itself is a process whereby a victim of antisocial behaviour can request a review of how their case was managed. In many areas, the CSP chair leads it. In other areas, it's the ASB manager or the community safety manager. And as I say, this paper is looking at the review of the outcome of that community trigger. It was realised after somebody came forward to question how their community trigger had been managed, that we realised that actually there isn't an agreed policy between all of the local authorities across LLR on managing those reviews. So a task and finish group was convened and looked at how that might be done going forward. To note, in some areas, the OPCC, so the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner, do pick up and manage those reviews. However, locally, what we're looking at is for, again, I'll use the word reciprocal, but for community safety chairs to reciprocate the review for each other. Just to put it into context, on page 18, in the last year, we've had a request for 26 community triggers, and 18 of those met the threshold which is set out in that paper in terms of what constitutes a trigger. And then over the last 5 years, we only had 5 requests for appeals, 1 in the last year. I am mindful, and we maybe should know that as lockdown eases, ASB may go up. We may just by default receive more applications for community triggers, and as a result of that, it's ifs and buts, isn't it? We may receive more requests for reviews of that trigger. And that's it really. In terms of the recommendation, we are recommending that the board does agree to a peer CSP-led community trigger appeal process, whereby for example, if there is an appeal in Blaby, one of the other CSPs chairs would support that review. I'm happy for the community safety team at Leicestershire County Council to build some sort of database to manage who's reciprocated which review for who, so that we don't get one chair doing more than other chairs, to make it equal and equitable really. And I'll hand back to you, Chair.
Thanks, Gertrude. I suppose that would be good, wouldn't it, just to have a bit of a rota, so you just go to the next one on the list, so we're not putting too much pressure on one CSP. Paul Hinton.
Hi, yeah, I just want to pick up the point, taking my hand down, pick up the point that Gurjit said about the OPCC doing the triggers. So Gurjit and I did have a chat about this. In fact, we had a chat again yesterday, didn't we? So, so there's no, I wasn't aware at the time that this was done by other offices. So what I've done is now contacted those offices to find out how that works and what they do. And I'll come back to the Gurjit when we've got that kind of information. So it's not a block. It's just, getting ourselves familiar with what the process could be.
Okay. I suppose, Paul, going forward, it might be something that the OPCC can support the CSP chairs doing the reviews. Maybe might be helpful to have some support from the office as they move forward, rather than the OPCC actually doing the reviews.
We do now have a partnership officer as well, so there is potential scope. So yeah. I'll explore. I mean, Sally's given me the contact, so I've followed up with them.
Okay, Julie.
Thanks, Chair. Community triggers are close to my heart, increasing in Charnwood, as we know, and appeals are very close to my heart as well at the moment, so fully welcome this. Just wanted to pick up, Gurjit, in terms of the policy, in terms of the appeals policy, in terms of making it robust, will the policy also pick up things like thresholds in terms of what will be looked at and what won't be looked at, and will it also pick up on how it will be dealt with in relation to complaints?
Is Sally on the call? There is a task and finish group, so there is a working group looking at this, and as I understand it, yes, it will look at all of those issues, but I don't know if Sally's on and if she can add anything else.
She's got her hand up, so we'll let her come in now if you want to, Sally.
Thank you. Yeah, the task and finish group has reviewed the old policy that was underway already, which is tied in quite nicely with this work. So we've included a lot more information around the appeals process, because as Gurjit touched on it, that was kind of what was missing from the original policy. So that's currently, it's been redrafted. Obviously, once a decision is made around this will also be included, the decision as to how this process works and who manages the appeals will be included in the policy. And then that will be shared with the partners to review and hopefully agree, and obviously discuss any potential amends. But yeah, those elements are included.
Sally, just before I move on, do we know what powers the appeal process actually has? Will that be part of that task and finish group as well? Because I think it's quite muddy waters, isn't it, as what powers the appeal process actually has and where it can refer things to or back to or move forward.
Yeah, it's really just a case, like Julie touched on, the thresholds for appeals. So what we're adding in now is actually some reasoning behind why an appeal might happen. So it's not just the case of somebody saying I'm unhappy with the outcome. It's got to be that the policy hasn't been followed, or the original review didn't take into account specific information that was relevant to the case. So we've made that quite specific, so people can't just appeal kind of at will, and they've got to meet those thresholds. And then so the case will literally be to review, okay, so what was it about the policy we've not followed, and obviously then the outcome will kind of rectify hopefully whatever was omitted. And similarly the same with if any relevant information was not taken into consideration as well in the original review.
So it would just be the process of that community trigger that will be double checked rather than the actual decision. Is that where we're trying to head to?
Yeah, that's it. So it's if something's been omitted, and about that process. So it's not just that every review is then reviewed again, because ultimately a multi-agency partnership meeting has taken place to carry out the review. So hopefully that should be robust enough as it is.
Yeah.
So if something's not been followed within that it needs appealing, basically.
Okay, Liz.
Thanks, Chair. Sorry if I missed a bit. I had to take a phone call. Can I just double check on a couple of points? So it says quite specifically a member of the public to require a CSP, etc., etc., etc. I seriously doubt the vast majority of members of the public even know what the Community Safety Partnership, let alone even exists. How are we going to communicate this to members of the public, and what is the threshold time frame? It says 3 separate incidents of antisocial behaviour within your area, or you've been a victim of a hate crime and you believe no action has been taken. What's the time period threshold? Three incidents over how long? A month, a year, 2 years, 10 years? What's the threshold time frame?
Chair, are you happy for me to pick that up?
Yeah, go ahead, Sally.
Yeah. So those details are all included within the policy document, and the policy document and any relevant information about how to how for a member of the public to raise it with a local authority should all be published on their website, and as or kind of accessible to the public if they contact directly their local authority. So it's part of the government guidance that we have to publish that information. So as local authorities that manage community triggers, we have to make that information available to the public. So it's quite a big push as part of the new antisocial, well, I say new, it's about 7 years old now, but the Antisocial Behaviour Crime and Policing Act that was brought in. There was a lot of work around victims and ensuring victims have a voice within this process, ensuring that they can kind of challenge any concerns that they might have. So the timings, I think off the top of my head, I think it's 28 days. That's how long the process can take, and there's timings for how long authorities have to reply to the victims within that process. But in terms of the threshold, that's within a 6-month period, and that's again, it's all detailed, and as part of this policy that we've written across LLR, we've actually drafted a section that partners can include on their website, so that each partner's got the same information on their website. So it should be consistent across LLR, and then they can just copy and paste that information and just update it with the relevant details of the officer in their area that will handle it. So each local authority has to designate an individual single point of contact, so to speak, that will lead on these, and then they're the ones that all the information goes to, that will then coordinate the reviews and things. So that is within government guidance and legislation. So we've tried to make it as straightforward as possible as a local authority. Most, if not all, I think, we did a bit of a review, and I think most of the partners already have some information, but there is a bit more that we need to be including, because one of the elements is we have to include how many reviews there have been over the last year and things like that, and how many requests we've received individually per authority. So it's just a few elements like that partners need to maintain, but other than that, the information is ready for them to kind of add on to their web pages already.
Okay, Chair, can I come back?
Yeah, I was just going to say it might be good for all CSPs just to go back to their own districts and just double check that they're putting this right on their website, that's available for the members of the public. So it might be just a good opportunity to double check when you go back to your districts. Yeah, but come back to us, Liz.
So I'm conscious, and I forget what the number is, but it's something like 20+% of society is digitally excluded. So putting it on the website excludes 20-odd% of the population. So I'm just really intrigued as to what proactive communication measures. It's okay having these policies, and it's okay sticking them on the website. What is the proactive policy that is going to tell a member of the public who is experiencing antisocial behaviour that we agree with, as it is an antisocial behaviour matter, that allows them to know what that community trigger is and that a community safety partnership exists? So is it going to be, like we have victim support, where we've had a victim of violence and actually the police, I think it's the police, physically put a piece of paper in their hand and saying, victim support, phone this number, these people are here to support and help you. So I'm just really interested in, panel members who know me of old know communicating with members of the public is one of my hot points. It's great having policies, but if we don't tell people about it and make that information easy to acquire, they won't know about it. And I come back to, I will put money on 90%, 99% of the population have no idea what a community safety partnership is. So back to you, Liz,
from my experience, if there has been, because it's obviously continued ASB, isn't it, that we're talking about, so all the partners that are dealing that, whether it's districts, police, etc., should be advising those victims that if they're not happy, there's a route that they can take. So I know that happens within my area of Charnwood, so that's probably another thing that CSPs need to all go back to, and make sure that their officers, their partnerships within their CSPs are advising these victims that there is a route for them to take if they're not happy with what's happening. So I would expect officers and police to be talking to victims about community triggers. And I know that happens in Charnwood, so something that, you know, to take back as well.
Yeah, I think, Chair, it's just a matter of that surety and certainty that it exists as a standard policy.
And that's probably something that the CSPs can take through that partnership meeting, isn't it? Just to make sure that everyone's aware of that. Paul Collett.
Thank you, Chair. Question for Sally and Gurjit. One of the things that's slowly changing within the community triggers is it always used to be a review of the process to make sure we hadn't missed anything. But the new work, particularly from the new guidance, is more about finding solutions. So looking outside of the box, trying to find alternative ways if all of the current strategies have failed. The only issue is, of course, those approaches are very hard to review because by their very nature, they're outside of a process. Is there any plans of how that can be incorporated?
Sally or Gurjit?
It's not something that's been raised with the task and finish group, to be honest, Paul. So if you want, I don't know if you can have a word with Miriam. Miriam actually sits on the task and finish group, so by all means have a word with her. It's not something I was aware of, so that'd be great as part of those discussions.
Okay, Gurjit.
A couple of points just on that. Firstly, to respond to Paul, I suppose in terms of a community trigger, the trigger itself will look at the processes and how the ASB was managed. So that would be the process of the review in terms of have agencies acted correctly, have the right processes been followed. The only other point I was going to make was in response to Councillor Phillimore, around how will members of the public know about the community trigger and that they can activate one. I guess the other thing we could do is highlight the process to advocates, so victim first, yourselves, members, elected members who work directly with communities, and other voluntary and community sector organisations that advocate and support people in their communities. So for those people who don't, as you say, don't have access for whatever reason to information, we could make sure that we circulate it widely amongst other networks.
Okay, thank you for that. But no one else with their hands up, but it's definitely needed. There's definitely a big hole in the system, so I'm welcoming this as I was the chair that was asked to review something and I had no idea what to review because there was no guidance. So very helpful for it to be coming forward. So is the plan that it will come back to us once you've got everything, if we all agree today, that you'll bring it back to us? Is that the plan?
Yeah, once it's agreed today, I'm happy to bring back the actual final process, if that would help, either to this meeting, or if you think it would be useful to have some sort of training on it, we could set up a separate 1 hour or whatever training to go through it as a process, whichever suits, Chair.
Yeah, I'm happy to do either if members think that would be useful. Would that training include sort of all partners as well? So it would, or were you just sort of planning to do it for the CSPs? I was thinking as the CSP chairs in terms of community, we could bring officers in as well, just in terms of the trigger process and the trigger review process. Okay, Andrew.
Yeah, just speak in favour of the training. I think I've got one in a couple of weeks to do, and some training would be useful.
Probably not there in a couple of weeks, but yeah. No, let's do that then.
Maybe do feedback on it.
Yeah, let's do that then. Let's have some sort of training forward with it, and then we can look at the policy once it's all in place and stuff. Okay, brilliant. Okay, thanks for that. Thanks, Sally. I did see your little one in the background there, so thanks for joining us in the middle of childcare. Okay, we'll move on to item 10 now. So the Violence Reduction Network update, and Grace, you're taking us through this.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Hopefully there is a presentation on screen. If someone could just let me know that would be fabulous.
It's just loading now.
Oh.
It's there, Grace.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much for inviting me along. I know I've been recently to talk about specific interventions, but it's actually been over a year since I presented on the work of the Violence Reduction Network when we were very embryonic. So it was more talk about what we were going to do, whereas this is hopefully going to give you an overview of some of our work over the last year. Chair, it's impossible for me to get it all in, so I've done a brief overview and then given some examples of our work throughout the presentation. But also, whilst I'm here to give members an early briefing on the new serious violence duty that is coming into force next year, because we now know that is going to happen, and it's going through Parliament now. So I thought it was a good opportunity just to let board members know about that. For those that don't know, the Violence Reduction Network was established back in September 2019. We're one of 18 areas that receive an annual Home Office grant. And that's because, unfortunately, we have higher than average admissions into hospital for knife-related injuries amongst under 25-year-olds. Importantly, we are at the bottom of those 18 different areas that get the funding. As you'd expect, places like the Met and Greater Manchester are at the top and receive a higher level of funding as a result. And our prescribed function is to, as a group of partners, to provide the leadership and strategic coordination of our local response to serious violence. And locally, at the moment, we define serious violence as the classic violence that's within the serious violence strategy, which is public place, involving or with or without weapons. So it includes knife crime as well. And we look at all ages, but we do have a priority focus on under 25-year-olds, and that's because young people and young adults are disproportionately affected by serious violence locally. We're expected to take a public health approach, which everyone will be familiar with, but that is part of the expectation from the Home Office. I guess that's what's different about the Violence Reduction Network, as it is applying a public health approach to the issue of serious violence rather than looking at it through solely a criminal justice lens. And then in terms of our formal governance, that's through the Violence Reduction Board that sits underneath the Strategic Partnership Board. And as you'll know, I manage the small central team that is driving an awful lot of this work forward. And then we have had a bit of a change in tone through this year's grant agreement. There's much more of an emphasis on closer working with the police. Importantly, just for members to note, that was because in some other areas, things were developing quite separately between the violence reduction units and what was the police surge funding. We haven't experienced that at all locally. We have very close working relationships, but the Home Office felt it was necessary to put that within this year's grant agreement. And then the other real notable change is violence reduction units and networks moving more towards operations. So using the data that we've been collating and analysed to actually drive operational activity as well as strategic planning, which I'll come back to in a second. So I thought it was just worth providing a summary graph of what's been happening with public place serious violence throughout last year, which of course was the most extraordinary years we could possibly imagine. And that's had a really big effect on the serious violence trends within that year. So we've got this zigzagging effect going on, which ordinarily we wouldn't see. And really, we can't draw too many conclusions from that at all, because it is such an extraordinary year. But what you will notice is that there's peaks and troughs which pretty much follow the line of restrictions. So when restrictions are in place, public place serious violence does fall, but importantly, it's still very much there. And then as those restrictions ease, then serious violence increases as well. And I guess the reason I'm mentioning that is, although amongst the under 25-year-olds, which is the turquoise line, we actually unexpectedly saw a decline between April and May this year. Actually, what we're now expecting is that serious violence will be rising as the restrictions ease. And of course, we've got the summer period as well, and the Euros going on at the moment. So we are expecting to see increases. And obviously, we've been mobilising for that for quite some time. And then the infographic you'll see there is basically just a summary. Every year we will do a summary of what serious violence has looked like. And again, we wouldn't draw too many conclusions from that. This year we'll actually be comparing serious violence to the year before the pandemic, you know, as well as the year of the pandemic as well, because it was such an unusual year. But you'll see there that overall we did see a fall in serious violence. We're certainly not claiming that as success. That's very much to do with the pandemic and the restrictions. Really importantly, the majority of serious violence is assault with injury, and in particular actual bodily harm. So whereas, you know, we do have an issue with knife-related violence locally, that's still very much in the minority of serious violence overall. As you know, we work across LLR, but our data shows that there are hotspots, if you like, and they're within the cities you'd expect, but also within the Charnwood area as well. And although 50% of the offences are committed in the city, if you tip that over, it means that a big proportion are committed within the county. It's just that they're more kind of evenly, they're more distributed rather over a wider space. And then some other interesting findings throughout the year was that whenever schools went back, we saw a return to the peak of serious violence being after school. So that's been quite a significant finding. We thought that was the case anyway, based on previous analysis, but we've really been able to confirm that, and that's really driven quite a lot of the work that we've been doing with schools and other partners. And then in terms of the people that it's most affecting, obviously we know that with public place serious violence, it's mainly males that are most at risk. But really interestingly, and quite a challenge for us locally, is that our kind of peak age spans young people and young adulthood. So it's 15 to 19-year-olds. And the reason I say it's a challenge is because that group span children's and adult services. And some of you will know that we do have some challenges with managing transitions between children and adult services. And then really interestingly, 66% of offences are by under 25s against under 25. So, you know, there are other older adults involved in serious violence, but there is also a big safeguarding issue here in terms of how much it's affecting young people and young adults. So in terms of where we are this year, it's a requirement from the Home Office, very much fits with the public health approach, that each year we undertake a strategic needs assessment. Within that, we will look at the data, insights from communities, what the evidence base is telling us about what's effective with serious violence, and we'll pull all that together with our partners into a response strategy. Within our response strategy this year, we fine-tuned our priorities just because we're a little bit maturer now, so we're just more aware of where we need to put our focus. And we have these 4 big strategic priorities, which interestingly, most of the violence reduction units have come out with similar areas, and that's a lot to do with the evidence base. So you'll see those there. And then in terms of the programme of work, I'm not expecting anyone to read this in any detail, and hopefully you've got it in your packs, but you'll see it's quite an extensive programme of work that's going on under the Violence Reduction Network umbrella. And what I would really emphasise with this is that an awful lot of it is done by the central team, but actually there's different partners across LLR that are leading on different elements of this. And an awful lot of it is strengthening what's already in place rather than new activity. But hopefully you'll get an idea of the range, particularly under prevention, where we've had to theme the different areas, because to be honest, there's quite a lot that we need to be doing in the prevention space. So you'll see the titles there as the different thematic areas that we're focusing on as a partnership. And then the one with the star, just to kind of raise it, is particularly with the serious violence duty coming in. We will absolutely prioritise this year supporting community safety partnerships, particularly around data, because as you'll see in a second, we've actually managed to make some really positive progress with data, and people will start to see the outputs from that over the next few months or so. So just to give you, onto data, just to give you some ideas of our work to date, with data, I mean, everybody wants it, don't they? We all want to see more of it. We all understand that we're not using it to best effect at the moment. And we've been taking a twin track approach with this. We did an awful lot of work up front, really understanding the different data sets that were available, talking and negotiating with partners in order to get our hands on that data as well. But what we're having to do is take this twin track approach, whereby what can we realistically achieve in time for that serious violence duty coming in, which means that localities will have the data they need to be able to deliver on that duty. But also, what are our longer term ambitions? Because what we do know is that in order to really make the best use of data, we've got to start investing more in the architecture and the infrastructure. So we're still fairly old-fashioned locally in terms of partners sending us data in Excel spreadsheets, us having to extract it, put it onto another format, etc. Whereas we know that it's quite possible from other sectors and other areas that we should have something much more automated, cloud-based, etc. So some of you might know that recently partners put in a bid for the Data Accelerator project through the Supporting Families programme, which is exactly the sort of investment we need to see to make better use of our data locally. But in terms of our priorities this year, we are drawing up a bespoke data sharing agreement in anticipation of this serious violence duty. To date, we've been using existing ones where they've been in place, although we've found that there's quite a few that aren't in place and need further work. In terms of our strategic understanding and planning and monitoring, we've been extending and improving the data sets, and I'll quickly whiz through which ones we've currently got our hands on at the moment. We have built a multi-agency dashboard, and we're having discussions about which platform is best to share that on. So what we've been doing in the background is, as we've been getting data, for example, from health, we've been making sure that we can break that down to locality area. So whatever we've got at the LLR level, yourselves will get at that locality level. But I wouldn't want to downplay how much work has had to go into that to get it to that point. Far more than I anticipated or predicted. And then in terms of operational activity, we're going to implement what's called injury surveillance, which I'll quickly go through in a second with you, because that's really relevant to community safety partnerships. But also we're doing some great work with police colleagues around really drilling down to who are these young people that we're most concerned about, what's the overlap between victims and perpetrators. And it won't surprise you to know there's a really big overlap. You know, people don't necessarily sit in one or the other camp. Also, what are the trajectories for these young people? What were those precursors before they actually committed offences of serious violence, so we can predict better where we need to intervene earlier? So as soon as we've done that analysis, obviously we'll share it with yourselves as well. But I've also put on the challenges, because it's absolutely full of challenges, this particular work stream, not least just the capacity of data owners to provide the data in a way that's really useful for us, which takes me back to that need to really invest in the architecture. And then also the breaking it down to a really granular level can get quite tricky, because it goes into the zone of identification then. And as soon as we're in that zone, certain partners get very nervous about the sharing of information, hence us doing the data sharing agreement to get past that issue as well. And then there are some issues, unfortunately, with data quality. We have to use what we've got basically, but we need to keep in mind those caveats. So I won't go through this in detail, but just to give you an idea of the data sets that we've got permission to have now from the various partners. And I guess something that will be music to many of your ears is that we have now got access to health data, in particular, absolutely invaluable hospital episode statistics. There's all sorts of gems of information about serious violence within the HEADS data. And Beth, our analyst, is currently going through that at the moment. We've also got permission to get ambulance call-out data, which is showing some really interesting differences between what the police data is telling us. And then really importantly, from local authorities, but also national data, we really need to be pulling in that data, not just about the extent and nature of serious violence, but also those risk and protective factors, the prevalence of those across our so at locality level as well. So we've got a range of different data there that we've been able to identify. And for now, we're stopping at that. you know, because actually there's lots of other data as well, but we're just really fine tuning what we're doing at the moment so that by the time that duty comes in, we've got a really great data set that's telling us an awful lot more about violence locally than we knew before. And then again, just to touch on this, but we will be doing briefings for CSPs around injury surveillance. Last year, we spent quite a lot of time, and it was quite difficult through COVID because obviously health partners had a few other things to deal with. But we did a proof of concept for what's called injury surveillance. It's not a great name, to be honest. We probably need to change it locally. But in a nutshell, what it does is bring together anonymised and aggregated data from the police, the local A&E survey, A&E in the city, come back to that in a second, and the ambulance service. And what it shows us is a bigger picture or a more thorough picture of where violence is happening, because we know that only about 50% of violence is reported to the police. And if you see the little pictures at the bottom, the little maps, you'll see the difference between ambulance and police data. And of course, there'll be a difference because not every violent incident that the police know about is going to involve an ambulance. But if you're able to see there's certain areas where the ambulance service are getting more call outs for violence than the police know about. And when you look at this at a more granular level, it really starts to show you some differences. So, for example, in other areas, it's identified violence around particular pubs that the police didn't know about, or around particular communities that the police didn't know about. So it's a really, really valuable data set. It has its limits, but it's got some real value to it. And so we've taken that back to the board, and the board has given us a big tick saying, yes, let's implement injury surveillance locally. So now you'll see the next steps there in terms of us actually pulling that together into the dashboard so that it's not only available for us to support strategic planning, but this really is data for action. This requires a multi-agency forum to have a look at it and work out what it's telling us and how can we change what we're doing in order to tackle whatever the issues are locally. So that's something that we'll probably do a webinar on that, just explaining it in a lot more detail once we've got those products. And then in terms of our prevention work, I thought it would just be really useful for you to know which interventions we're testing this year. Most of them continue from last year because the pandemic really did get in the way of the operations of them. You'll know about mentors in violence prevention. Really pleased to say that schools are getting back on board with that after obviously having quite a few other challenges on their hands. We've got an event actually with Redmore, I think it is, on Monday, who are doing all their training with all their mentors ready for the new school year next year. We're also funding a community resolution and prevention project. That's just in the city at the moment, but we'll be using that learning and looking at how we can scale that up across the area if successful, showing really good indicators of success at the moment. And then in terms of preventing the recurrence of violence, you'll know that we've got the project in the A&E department in UHL. Really importantly for county colleagues, we've now got links with Queen's in Nottinghamshire and Coventry and Warwickshire formalised. So because there's services in there, they're not commissioned by us, but making sure that any county young people that pop up at those A&E departments, they're linked back into our workers in Leicestershire, so we make sure that they get the same service. And then we also commission Leicestershire Cares to provide an employment service for ex-offenders, basically under the age of 25-year-olds, and that's LLR wide as well. And then we're looking at the possibility of a community outreach project using community mentors this year. That's still in the planning stages, but hopefully I'll have news about that soon. And then we've also very recently and at high speed submitted 2 bids for additional Home Office funding. One is around using youth workers within schools to engage those young people that are on the brink of exclusion and already showing behaviours of concern around violence. And then the other one is extending the hospital service into police custody settings, because we know that that's another reachable moment where we're able to reach young people at that point where they're most likely to accept help. And then if I was you, I'd be asking me, what's the impact? So I thought I'd give some reassurance around our approach to evaluation. Still quite early days, but for all of our interventions and anything where we've got significant spend, we pull together what's called a theory of change, and this is the one for the project in A&E. And what this allows us to do is really check our logic around the design of things and how that will lead to short and intermediate outcomes and eventually have an impact. And we've now, through employing Stevie, who some of you have met, we've now got the monitoring framework in place for all of our interventions, so that we can evaluate them internally as well as commission out external evaluations as well. So really got our ducks lined up with that. And we'll start to see our whole, the whole purpose is to test these interventions and start to really see whether or not they're having the impact that we expect them to have. And then a big piece of our work has been around campaigns. So I thought I would just very briefly show you the different campaigns that we've commissioned over the last year or so. Last year, the biggest campaign was around the Are You Listening film. If you haven't seen that, I can pop the link in the chat and people can have a look at it at their leisure. And that was very much aimed at adults, trusted adults, trying to equip them with the knowledge to actually do something if they see the signs of child criminal exploitation. But our other campaigns very much focus on young people. And what we've tried to do this year, using the best available evidence, which is quite limited, is move beyond simply educating to actually empowering young people to play a role. So it's very action orientated. And the theory we've used here is the bystander theory, that basically we've got to accept that young people, the most influential people for young people, are young people, using that kind of power of peers to really try and get them to look out for one another. But also we've tried to make it a lot more positive. So rather than finger wagging or telling everybody, the worst case scenario, actually really focusing on the vast majority of young people who are fabulous and great. And, most young people do not get involved in serious violence. So really focusing on the majority rather than the very small minority that we're concerned about. And really importantly, and way beyond me, is we've been promoting it via social media platforms that young people are using. So I often say when I'm presenting about the campaigns, if you're above a certain age, I'm not particularly concerned if you haven't seen this campaign at all, because unfortunately it's not for us. It's for young people. So it's getting pushed out across those social channels. In fact, I'd be impressed if you have seen it. But so we're using those platforms, and it's a really flexible design as well. So we can use it across LLR, but we can also tailor it to certain communities of young people if we need to. So the two main young person campaigns is we've worked with the police to refresh their Lives Not Knives material. You'll see that it's kind of the real kind of like Nike type looking campaign, which we've had brilliant feedback from young people about it being much more catchy, much more what they're interested in than previous campaigns. And then our flagship campaign, which we're looking to partner with a range of different partnerships and and that's which I will quickly show you. And then we also are building a resources website, which is for the entire partnership. It's going to focus on adolescent risk. So it will have things like knife crime, it will have exploitation in there, and it's going to be aimed principally at young people, so a one-stop shop for young people, but there'll also be sections on there for parents and professionals as well, because what we've found through our campaign work is we don't have anywhere really to signpost to, and a critical part of campaigning is that you can signpost to really useful information, so that's something we've been building in the background. The Make a Stand campaign, again, very positive. It's been co-created with young people, so we're much more confident that we've got it right. And it does heavily rely on the principles of the active bystander theory. But what was interesting working with young people is what we thought was a useful toolbox wasn't so useful to them, and they distilled it down to these three main things from a bystander approach. So 3 options for them if they're in a situation or can see a situation bubbling away. And there's lots of information behind those different options on a standalone website that they can use. And the guy at the bottom, that's there's a video there of him basically talking young people through the bystander toolkit. There's some of the graphics. As I say, they're all being pushed out via social media, so they're popping up on mobile phones, on iPads, etc. We're using lots of innovative ways to reach young people. The stats so far are pretty impressive. We know that they're reaching, not only do we know that they're reaching a lot of young people, but the methods that we've used mean that we know the young people in which areas, and sometimes the age ranges as well. So it's a lot more useful information that we're getting through this particular approach. But probably the most impressive reach, not so much in numbers, is through the radio advert, and it's like some sort of online, I think it's called global radio, online radio, because not only do we know that it's reached nearly 250,000, but we also know that it's got a 94% listen rate. That means that young people haven't just looked at it and kind of just scrolled past or whatever. They've actually got that far into the advert. So it's a really good way of knowing that you're reaching. And I'm just going to quickly play you the radio advert because A, I think it's a really good idea, but B, it's the bit that's showing the most success so far. So hopefully, I'm going to look at yourself, Chair, to see whether or not you can hear it when I press play. You just give me a nod.
A shout out to those who are making a stand.
By using words, not weapons, or asking for a hand. To the ones who stopped mates from carrying a knife. To the ones who said, bro, that fight could cost you your life. To the ones who dragged others off for a chat and helped dampen the flames of a fiery spat. To those who spoke up and said, nah, that's not right. To those who rejected the calls to fight. To those who got help even though you got mocked, but it helped out a stranger and the violence got stopped. We give you respect. Now let's show others the way to make a stand against violence and make that stand start today. Be a mate. Take action against violence in Leicestershire. Go to makeastand.co.uk.
Thank you. I mean, I played that because I think it's really good, but also the young people are really proud of it. And it is the one that seems to be reaching the most young people at the moment in the most effective way. And then another thing we're doing around leadership, last year we launched the first community leadership programme. If I just quickly, I know I'm going to run out of time, Chair. If I quickly say we need to skip through the next few. I'll quickly say about that. It's in your packs. But what I would say about the leadership programme is these leaders have obviously come from communities across LLR. So what we are in the process of doing is just making sure that now they have graduated from the programme they've done, that they are connected up with local CSPs, where there is one, because there's a huge opportunity with them. We think that some of them are already known to you, but we've got a few where we're not so sure. So we'll just make sure we do that so that we've got that local connection. 2 of them are joining the Violence Reduction Board, and it might be an idea to consider whether or not there's room for a community leader on some of the local CSP boards as well. They're very keen to get involved. And then in terms of the serious violence duty updates, just 2 slides on this. Just really wanted to let people know that it's definitely coming. You'll see there in purple, they will be the duty holders. So it's the usual suspects. Schools, bit of a missed opportunity in my mind, but schools will have a duty to cooperate rather than become a duty holder, but we're still working closely with schools to help them mobilise for that. The Police and Crime Commissioner will obviously have a really important role in terms of supporting local partnerships, but also in monitoring effectiveness as well. And really importantly, the Crime and Disorder Act will be amended so that CSPs do have to have serious violence as an explicit priority. But in terms of what that means, well, there's a lack of detail still, really, to be honest, but that statutory, the draft guidance has come out, so I'll circulate that, but they're likely to amend it. But it pretty much mirrors what we're doing as a partnership around the Violence Reduction Network. But what it does is it puts partners' responsibilities on a statutory footing. It doesn't put the VRN on a statutory footing, but puts partners' responsibilities on that statutory footing. And in a nutshell, we're expected to put together a strategic needs assessment, but we'll need to do that centrally as well as in localities. So we'll need to have a conversation around that. We need to put together a response strategy, but again, it's got to have that kind of hub and spoke flavour to it. And the government won't tell us what partnership model to use, but I imagine that we've already got one, which again is that kind of violence reduction network, but making sure that has a local footprint through CSPs. And then it expects us to monitor our performance, but really importantly, particularly for those that are involved in children's services, is we are expecting it to come into routine inspections as that duty comes in. And thank you, Chair. I know that was quite a long time taken, but hopefully it was useful.
No, there's quite a few members, isn't there? So I think it's really good just to get them up to speed on the work you're doing. I think this one particularly for me has sort of brought everything together that you've been working on for the last 2 years. Those foundations have been there and it's just starting to see the fruit appear now. So there's some really good work going on there. And just those stats are really interesting about when the violence is occurring after schools, because that's when I get my reports of stabbings and injuries like that coming through to me. It's after school, then when they're coming out and gangs are waiting and stuff like that. So really interesting stuff there. No one's indicating that they've got any questions or anything. I think you did a really comprehensive review of that, so thanks for that, and obviously come back when you've got some further updates, but more working with the CSPs and stuff like that would be really good. I think most partners will welcome that. Neil, sorry, I've just seen your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, that was an excellent report from Grace, and I really appreciate the update given. I was obviously interested in the statistics for 2021, which of course are skewed by COVID, and I would have been interested also in the previous year, 1920, just to look at the difference between the two, and of course, intriguingly, you put the peak time for the violence being identified in the afternoon between 3 and 4 p.m. because often serious violence in public places occur at night, and may well be linked to licensed premises or consumption of alcohol. And that would not have been a feature in 2021. And clearly that may well be a return 21-22. So I appreciate your observations about that. And the other thing which in my other job, which I have always found extremely useful, is excellent quality, not just good quality, but excellent quality CCTV in public places, because that drives good prosecutions and effective prosecutions as well, should it end up in court proceedings. Thank you.
Thanks, Neil. Okay, thanks for that, Grace, and thank you, and we'll see you soon. Thanks for coming. Okay, we are a little bit behind time, so I'll just ask other presenters to keep it as brief as possible. So we'll move on to item 11, which is the police prevent team. So Bill, I think you're taking us through this.
Thanks, Chair. How long have I got? I've got about 4 slides to go through.
Oh, that'd be perfect.
Yeah, okay, right. So just a slight alteration on the minutes. It's got me down as inspector. I'm actually a retired police officer. So I'm the regional prevent coordinator is my.
Okay, we'll make sure that's corrected. Thank you.
Okay, so can you see that PowerPoint?
It's not come up for me yet. It's just loading now.
Okay, so I've got about 4 slides. Going to give you an overview of the makeup of the prevent team, our activities, and then some challenges we've faced and some challenges ahead as we see them. Please stop me at any time for questions. So I know a lot of you will be familiar with Prevent, but I always find this little schematic a real simple way to divide what we do. So the bottom tier of that triangle, tackling the causes of radicalisation, that effectively is government messaging, Home Office support to third sector groups to provide an alternative narrative to the messaging that comes out from extremist groups to try and undermine their messaging. Early intervention is the bulk of the work that my team are involved in. That is identifying and safeguarding those we believe risk of radicalisation, and that's within channel. And then the pointy bit of that triangle is for those who've already been engaged in terrorism. And I have a small team in the East Midlands that manages those as they transition out from prison into the community. Any questions on that before I move on?
No, if you carry on, we'll take questions at the end, Bill, if that's
right,
okay.
I'm just off one screen here, so if there is anybody interjecting, I'll be relying on yourself to flag that up. So We've got 7 officers in the team in Leicestershire. They're based at Spinney Hill Police Station, deliberately there to make them close to communities as well as the neighbourhood policing effort there. So there's 1 sergeant, 4 officers and 2 members of staff. It's important to recognise they're actually seconded to counter-terrorism policing in the East Midlands. So they're part of a wider network, both regionally and nationally, and we can flex across the region, and sometimes we work outside of the region. And the key part of our work is identifying those at risk. So that is raising awareness with partners, with briefing materials and some targeted training, and then also assessing an individual in terms of their engagement with an extremist ideology and what their capability and intent is. And then if it's suitable for channel, safeguarding them through those mechanisms, and obviously the local authority lead on that. And those that won't engage, won't take the support on offer from channel, we will manage the residual risk around those individuals. So that's the core amount of work that we do: identify, safeguard and manage risk would be the main themes of the team's work. Okay, so challenges. Unsurprisingly, the pandemic really shaped our work last year. So nationally, we saw figures go off a cliff. Now, one of the frustrations here, because of the format of this ending in the public domain, I can't talk around exact figures. But when lockdown started, vulnerable people were less visible to agencies, and particularly schools that make up a lot of our referrals. And nationally, we saw referrals really decrease. Interestingly, they didn't in the East Midlands, and that includes obviously Leicester. We saw figures remain stable, and there was a shift in where we're getting referrals from. And we were getting them from frontline officers, and we were getting them from the mental health sector as people had episodes that suggested they were potentially vulnerable to radicalisation. However, in our 3rd lockdown, I'm losing track of them, but in our 3rd lockdown, we did see a significant decrease in referrals. And we almost think a bit of kind of fatigue around that in terms of some of the messaging that we put out. There was a real challenge for us to support vulnerable people during the pandemic because all partners were working very differently. The Home Office, who lead on this strategy, wanted us to provide support initially remotely, and we made representations that wasn't really practical with the cohort of people that we reached out to, because they already were deeply suspicious of us, potentially paranoid, and we effectively worked around and carried out the same number of interventions, including with mentors face to face, and we did that effectively by taking place in open air, police station, car parks, and things like that. But I'm confident that we provided the same level of support to individuals who were at risk during that period. So the year ahead, the main issue for me is trust and confidence, and some real parallels to what Grace was talking around. Friends and family are a section that we're really interested in. We get low level of referrals from the public who are immediately connected with somebody, and it's that bystander effect. All the learning from terrorist attacks suggests there has been somebody who has been worried about the behaviour but not had the confidence to come forward. So there's a national resource website, Act Early, which has not just referral pathways but resources and highlights the signs of radicalisation. So we have a small number. We did see that increase during the pandemic, and we assess that's down to the fact that people were really concerned about the behaviours of loved ones during lockdown, as they were spending more time online and intersecting with extremist content. And interestingly, our referrals from friends and family are of really high quality because they are motivated by an absolute concern, and they're not just following policy. And we're also looking at how we can support friends and family better during the referral process. Feedback in the past has been that once they've made that referral, they felt kind of excluded from it. And then a real need to address online radicalisation. It's always been a significant part of our work, both in the prevent and the pursue realm. About 50% of all investigations have an online element to it. But the pandemic has increased all our time online, and it also, extremists have used that opportunity to put out messaging that effectively looks to amplify grievances that have grown up during the the pandemic, and we've got a number of products that we're looking to use with parents, teachers, and a specific one for further ed and higher ed. So we had an online seminar during lockdown, which we had over 400 people dial into, and we assessed that's a real kind of unmet demand at the moment. Excuse me. So key issues for partners. So I think everyone dialed in will be subject to prevent duty, apart from the fire service. The main thing in the prevent duty is around your obligation to train your staff, and it's just that reminder, that what that training needs to be focused on. So not only is it current and effective, but does it focus on what the national risk and the local risk is? Are your staff cited on what the signs of vulnerability are, and do they know how to make a referral? And I'd just be interested to know whether partners actually track referrals. Are they aware of how many are made from their agency? Because we do see discrepancies between different sectors and also within sectors. Schools who would appear to pull on the same catchment, some are consistently making referrals and others are not. But that's mirrored across all the sectors. And then the last piece is an appeal, really. The counter-terrorist local profile, some of you will be briefed on that. Effectively, it describes how the national risk relates to the communities of LLR, and it is a partnership document. It is it's drawn up in conjunction with partners. There will be a survey that goes out. There will be a workshop that we will hold in September. And last year we produced the richest document I've seen in my 6 years in Prevent, and that was because of the partnership element, that feeling of community sentiment, the levels of awareness of Prevent within organisations, and it gave us a real steer for where the gaps are and where the opportunities are going forward. So I just ask for your support during the collection plan in September, and we'll also be looking for opportunities that we can piggyback on to get that document out and present it to people. So that's it from me. If you've got any questions.
Thanks, Bill. Just one question from me. No one else has got hands up. They might in a minute. Just about the review with the Manchester Arena bombing. Yep. So the learning that might come out of that, will that filter down to sort of local areas as well, or will we see any effect of that?
Well, I mean, interestingly, there's an element of the bystander there with security who were, clearly it's at the real pointy end of activity, but who didn't have the confidence to challenge and come forward. So I think there's going to be something around that. The first report came out yesterday. There's a further 2 to come out. Yeah, so I imagine those points will. The protect duty is clearly under consultation at the moment, and that has obviously fallen out from the Arena inquiry.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Is there anyone else that's got any questions for Bill? Paul, Colette?
Yeah, just quickly, is there any forward planning around Prevent for HS2 with the radicalisation and environmental impact of that?
HS2?
Yeah. High-speed rail.
Yeah. Okay. So we are really kind of loath to get involved in protest. So there's a steer that came out just over 12 months ago around counter-terrorist policing shouldn't be involved in the policing of protests, and that would include unlawful protests. So there would have to be an elevated, aggravated element behind that before it became into the Prevent field. So an obvious one would be animal rights, where that becomes targeted aggressive behaviour towards farms, etc.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Bill. Thank you for coming and giving that for us. Okay, no other questions, so we'll move on to item 12, which is the partner update from the Office for Police and Crime Commissioner. I'll just formally welcome Rupert Matthews as the new Police and Crime Commissioner, who's been in his role for 5 weeks, 6 weeks, something like that. Maybe 4 weeks. Yes. 5 weeks. Okay, I think Paul's going to lead us through this. I don't know if you want to start off, Rupert, but obviously we've read the report, so if you just want to pick out some key areas from that.
No, I'm a great believer in tabling a comprehensive report that everyone can read before the meeting, so that apart from any introductory remarks that the Chief Executive wants to make, I'm not going to waste everyone's time by repeating what you've already read, so we can almost jump straight to questions. But Paul, did you want to add anything?
No, I mean, I can catch up some time, Deborah, if you want. I think it's self-explanatory. A lot of it overlaps with what Grace was talking about, and I think it's. I think I must tell Ewan not to put me on after Grace, because it always looks a bit embarrassing, doesn't it? You know. But no, I think it's they're there for all to see. The only things I was going to say was new PCC. So welcome, Rupert. You've done that already. And actually, I was going to say. The community leadership program was absolutely fantastic, and you know, really enjoyed that. One of the best things I've seen in years. But I'll leave it there.
Okay, just one question from me. The Safer Streets project. So two other town centres now. So Castlington, Hinckley, Lutterworth, and Melton. Have we got that funding? Is that in place now, or?
Yeah, it's all there. It's all just needs to go out in the contracts, Deborah. So it's all sorted. We're now on round 3, so we're getting round 3 out, which is if you remember the violence against women and girls. And there will be, actually, I'm not sure it's around 4 of Safer Streets, but certainly a nighttime economy one as well. So I was talking about the nighttime economy one with nighttime economy group on Wednesday. So there seems to be a never-ending round of stuff coming out that we're having to put in for, but so far we've been really successful on these things, and it's, you know, they're all partnership based. So I think they should be going out any day now. So I'll check out with Simon afterwards, Deborah, and let you know.
Okay.
Yeah, if I can just jump in on that, one of the things that I'm quite keen to do, but I think my predecessor sometimes wasn't, is to publicise this to the public. I mean, it's for the public's benefit, and what I'd like to do is cooperate with you guys. And perhaps with division councillors and so on, in trying to get some social media pushed out to the relevant areas, because, you know, I mean, it's all great doing this stuff, but if the people are going to be using it aren't aware it's there, I'm not sure it's achieving much. So it won't affect all of you, but when these things do, as Paul says, we're moving on to stage 3, and there are other pots of money coming available. Yeah, I want to involve you. I want to involve local councillors, and just try and publicise it as much as possible to the public who, you know, via their taxes are paying for it after all.
Okay. Thanks, Rupert. Andrew?
Just say that so we've got some fund up in Castle Darnton, so I will be very happy to welcome Rupert to Castle Darnton, and we'll try and get as much publicity about that as we can.
Excellent. And in return, I will invite you to a commissioner's cuppa in that little tea room that's opposite the entrance to the church in the High Street, if you know.
Yes, yeah, I know. Yeah. 45.
Yeah, we'll go there for a cup of tea.
Is that offered to everyone that invites you to the area, Rupert? Cup of tea? Yeah.
I don't see why the commissioner can't buy a cuppa to everyone. I mean, you know, we've got plenty to talk about while we're there, haven't we? So might as well schedule in half an hour, 40 minutes to.
Let's all go to Castle Darnton.
Okay. Is there any other questions for Rupert or Paul? No, brilliant. Perhaps we just tag you on to Grace's bit, Paul, rather than having you as separate. Then you can just follow in her glory, can't you?
But I think I go first, so I don't have the ignominy of following on her presentation. Anyway, yeah.
Okay, thanks a lot. We'll move on to item 13, the probation transition update. Bob? We're nearly at D-Day, I think, now, aren't we?
Yes, we are. I'm just going to share my screen. So if you could just, as you've done before, just let me know when it's appearing. I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, it's loading up. Okay, you're there.
Thank you. Right, yeah. Is it showing in presentation mode as well?
No, not yet.
I did try. Sometimes it doesn't like it at the moment. Try it from there. Oh, there we are. Is that doing it now? I think it is. Yeah, thank you. So I shall try and keep this brief, because obviously I know with time constraints, just the first couple of slides are just a reminder for those who haven't aren't aware that 2014 the probation service was divided into two. The National Probation Service taking on high risk and MAPA cases and other activities around courts, and it became part of a National Probation Service, part of the civil service, and divided into divisions. And community rehabilitation companies that managed medium and low risk and did unpaid work and other activities went out to the private and voluntary sector. In May of 2019, it was decided to bring those two halves of the probation service back into one organisation. And I think it's true to say that whilst I was a senior manager during the splitting of the service in 2014, bringing it all back together again is proving far more complicated and difficult, and is taking up an awful lot of time and organisational energy. So yes, D-Day is the 26th of June, which is a Saturday. Quite a lot of probation activities happen at the weekend, such as unpaid work and residential services, so that's as relevant to us as any other day. But for much of our services, Monday the 28th of June will be the day when it all comes back together, and that's what we are referring to internally as day one. However, I think from an external point of view, partners represented on this meeting today will see very little change immediately, other than things like what it says on email, signatories and what have you. But really the way that we're going about this change is to, from a structural point of view, leave things as they are and then merge the two halves together in terms of staff, caseload, etc., over a period of time. So there won't be an immediate change to what you see. However, the bits that you might be aware of, so for example, in the last 7 years, whereas there used to be one probation representative at various boards and various other meetings, there were two, one from CRC, one from MPS. That will change back to one representation, which is no bad thing in terms of using resource most efficiently. Some information sharing agreements will need to be amended to reflect the new look of the probation service. You may see some staff who were previously employed by CRCs will get new email addresses, justice email addresses, but they've all got forwarding capabilities on the previous email addresses, so that shouldn't create too many problems operationally. There aren't going to be any office moves in our local area. The only move that there will be is in the city, but that's not going to happen straight away because there's major works planned for the MPS building in the city. So we're going to keep the two city offices until that work is done. So really, much of what you'll see from an external point of view as our partner agencies won't be a massive change. Our footprint will remain much the same in terms of city offices and then having permanent presences in Loughborough, Culver, Milton, and we've still got a little work to do to sort out our presence in Oakham, Hinckley, Market Harbour. We do have a presence in them, but not a permanent presence at the moment. Challenges, I suppose, just two more slides, and these are the bits that I just want to say a little bit more about. So it's a significant organisational restructure, and I'm sure there's plenty of people on this call who've been through organisational restructures before. It takes up an awful lot of organisational time and energy, bringing together different staffing structures, models, but you name it. So that's creating quite a significant challenge. It's dominated much of my life in the recent months, and I know will continue to do over the coming months as we merge it all together. However, on top of all of that, we have significant workload, staffing, resourcing issues. We are actually bringing two parts of a probation service together that have been under-resourced in the last few years. So certainly bringing it together won't solve all of that, although there is some good news on the horizon in terms of resourcing. We have a new way of commissioning and accessing services, specialist services, which will take a little while to bed in. That represents around about 10% of the national probation budget going into that. And then there's a whole load of legacy issues that we'll have to manage when two organisations finish and one new one starts, and a whole load of legacy issues to to resolve. But I wanted to end on a positive note, because actually it is an extremely positive thing that the probation service is coming back together as one organisation without a shadow of a doubt. So one organisation again, I think that's good for us internally in probation service. I think it's good for the partners that we work with as well, without a doubt. Greater clarity, uniformity to our, there'll be one probation approach, one probation service to deal with. I think, and I think particularly pertinent to this meeting is we'll have a combined senior and middle management resource, which I think will, and certainly my intention as head of the combined service in Leicestershire and Rutland is to, I think, regain some of that local footprint in a sort of strategic and tactical level. So looking at CSPs and what have you, which I think we've lost through the through the stretched resource across two organisations in recent years. So I think that won't happen straight away, because we still have challenges in terms of bringing it all together and staffing issues. But I think once the dust settles and we start to get our act together as one organisation, what I really want to do is to regain that footprint sort of nationally, locally, and across the county in terms of probation involvement. There will be co-commissioning opportunities, so we will have funding as part of the restructuring that will enable us to do co-commissioning. We're already doing some co-commissioning with the city and county with regard to the substance misuse recommissioning process that's going through at the moment, but there will be other opportunities that come up as well. And finally, we are getting a significant increase in staff numbers over the next 2 years. So whilst it's a challenge for us having to manage the learning of a lot of newly appointed staff and training them for the long term, that's only good news. So again, the future is looking good for the probation service from a resources point of view in the coming years. So I think that's all I want to say by way of update of where we're at. I can't see the chat bar or hands up, so in fact I'll share my screen and then I don't know if there are any. So
yeah, we've got a few. First one, Les.
Thanks, Chair. I think this is probably an opportune moment to raise this, Bob, if you're happy to. If not, Chair, I'm quite happy to bat it into other business, but it involves quite a lot of the collective discussions this morning, is prison release in particular. And I'm looking for a nod from, I've got a nod from Bob, that's fine. Yeah, I've literally come out of a meeting this morning with my housing team, who were given less than 36 hours notice of a prisoner release where we had to provide accommodation. And not only do we have to provide accommodation, this particular prisoner came with complex needs. I'm sorry, 36 hours is not good enough. We've got to be given much more notice than that. So a very pertinent point, I think, for the collective programme of what we achieve here. But it's not the first time. You know, we've got to have a much more defined policy on comms with the housing teams.
Well, I'm happy to say there is. And in fact, we're working on a pre-release protocol as we speak, actually. And we spent quite a lot of time at the Strategic Offender Management Board on Wednesday talking about that. Chris Lambert and others are involved across city and county. So in fact, I've got a meeting on Monday to finalise the pre-release prison protocol. So that is exactly what that is designed to deal with. I would also say that sometimes we don't get any more notice than that. So we get people who are released directly from court who spent time on remand, or they get a sentence, but they've only literally got 2 days left to serve. So that, however good a protocol and agreement is, it will never stop people being released at short notice that we're not expecting. But I actually get your point, and I know of it. Situations where people have been released when we should have been giving more notice, and that shouldn't have occurred. So hopefully the pre-release protocol will go towards addressing that, but it won't stop all unexpected releases, because they happen as a result of, like I say, people serving time on remand and what have you. But,
okay. So
thank you
for that, Bob. Thank you for that, Chair. And you know, of course, Bob, you know, there will always be the unmanageable. What we need to get right is what we can manage, and dumping that on my officers is not fair. It's not fair on the officers, it's not fair on our housing partners, it's not fair on the individual. And if we can't accommodate it, a lot of those people will go back to their own families, and it's not fair on them either. So I'm glad you're working on a pre-release protocol.
I think the other thing that's worth saying, which I didn't spend a lot of time talking about, is that I talked about the 10% of the national budget going on to various services. One of those is accommodation, and in fact, NACRO using the bridge are going to be the providers for Leicestershire and Rutland in terms of accommodation services. So I'm hooking them in with all the local housing providers and districts to make sure that they're working with you as well on that.
Brilliant.
Thanks, Bob. Paul Hinson.
Yeah, just to kind of reinforce, I think this is great news. A couple of things. Actually, on the accommodation, we did have Jim Donaldson, Governor of Leicester Prison, saying recently at SPB that 80% of his people are released at no fixed abode. But that's something maybe we can raise later.
I'm surprised by that figure. That's not a figure that I recognise, Paul. I think there's two things to say there. One is it depends what your definition is of no fixed abode. I also think that obviously people get released to other areas rather than just Leicester Prison. So
Leicester. I mean, I wonder also. I mean, you and I know this, Bob, don't we? You know, people get no fixed abode because they get a better deal. But anyway, let's leave that aside. The thing I was going to raise was you and I are having conversations about community payback and the possibility of making that a kind of more local arrangement that works for, more directly for community. It does anyway, doesn't it? Work for community.
It does, and I think again bringing it all back in house as one organisation will enable us to have a lot greater say on that rather than it being that sitting within the private organisation.
Yeah, so I think there's lots of potential benefits there, and there's an awful lot of work that goes on through community payback.
Yeah,
thousands and thousands of hours locally. So we'll keep you updated on how that progresses.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Andrew.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, I'd agree. It's a very good thing that it's being brought back together. Just to declare my wife is a probation officer, not in Leicestershire, and it was daft to split it in the first place, but that's old ground. What I was just wondering, so you've got 30% who are managing the high risk offenders. Going forward, will that 30% continue with high risk offenders, or will it be more of a split between high and low level between them and the CRC officers?
Yeah, the ultimate aim is to bring it all together, merging caseloads. So individual probation practitioners, probation officers will have a mixed caseload. There will be some specialisms, but they won't necessarily be about risk. They'll be about things like we'll have specialist women's teams, young adult people. So in fact, one possibility is to have short sentence teams, which again will address some of the accommodation issues as well. So the ultimate aim, it won't happen straight away, but the ultimate aim is to have a completely merged with organisation with mixed caseloads as before, really.
Yeah, will that require some more training for the CRC?
Yeah. So CRC staff are undergoing training now. That's one of the reasons why we can't move to that model straight away, is there's quite a lot of training needs for the CRC staff before we can do that.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks.
Thanks, Andrew.
Okay, thanks. That's Bob. No one else indicating. So good luck for the 26th, and hopefully we'll see you back here soon with a great update for us.
I will do. Thank you, Chair.
Worked perfectly in the transition stage.
Thank you, Chair.
Good luck. Thanks for coming. Okay, we'll move on to item 14, the Safer Communities Performance. Rick, I think we've got your report, and obviously members can look on the dashboard at their own particular areas overall. So is there anything you just want to pick up particularly from your report?
The only thing I'd say, Chair, is that this is very much a repeat of the last two reports, in as much as the trends are pretty well the same. Violent crime is going up, but we've already had an input from Grace in relation to that. Crime generally is going down. ASB is going down, accepting, of course, that it's a complex area, and in some areas it's actually going up. That's really a summary of the report itself. Of course, the report then goes into further detail under each section, but that's available for everyone to read.
Okay, thanks, Rick. I hope members are taking the opportunity to look on the Tableau link there. You can really drill down, can't you, to your local area and stuff. So that's really helpful for that link there. So I hope members do that. Is there any other questions for Rick from anyone for that report? No. Okay, we'll move on to the information bits now. So on to 15, Glen Parva Prison. I think we've got Nick and Raj here. I don't know who's starting.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, everybody. It's interesting actually to follow on from Bob, really. So Bob's talking about releases and we're talking about incarceration, so it kind of flows quite nicely. So thanks for that. I don't know, Nick, do you want to start, or shall I? Your preference?
No, I'm happy to make a start. So just to update you, good morning, everybody. I'm Nick.
Sorry, Nick, it's great background. You look like you're incarcerated, but I'm sorry I had to make it.
So that is the new prison at HMP Five Wells, which will look exactly like the new prison at Glen Parva. That is the first floor on the first house block that's completed. So really proud of that. Sparkly clean. Yeah, so just to update you folks, a quick update from me, and conscious of your time. So my particular role is mobilising the prison from construction into getting ready for operational readiness, and part of that is being involved in the operator competition. So the government have decided that Glen Parva will be privately operated. So the government currently has 14 privately operated prisons out of 117 in England and Wales. We have completed the contract for HMP Five Wells in Wellingborough. G4S won that contract. We are now in competition for the Glen Parva prison. 4 companies are bidding for that, which is G4S, Serco and Sodexo, who all currently operate prisons, and MTC are also bidding for that prison. So we have been carrying out dialogue with those bidders over the last 2 months, just engaging with them about our vision for the prison, the very specific rehabilitative culture of the prison, and the very clear focus around resettlement for men who are released from that prison. Anyone who is to be released from that prison should reside within 90 minutes of the prison. That's the current catchment area, and there is a very clear focus on resettlement, a very clear drive that the operator will have very distinct plans for resettling men on release, things like it's been mentioned already about housing, employment, benefits, going to a family home, etc., wherever possible. So we are just coming to the end of the dialogue for the bids. Final bids are due later this month, and then we have to go through a process of evaluating those bids through the very many work streams that exist, looking to come out with a preferred bidder around about September, October, announce the contract, then move into the standstill period with full contract award expected at the end of this year. So that's the end of 2021, which will lead on to full mobilisation with first prisoner expected round about May 2023. So things are on track in that respect. And here I'll hand over to Raj, who is responsible for the building of the prison on the site of the old prison at HMP Glen Parva. But happy to take any questions, folks.
Okay, no questions at the minute. So do you want to carry on, Raj?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm just going to share my screen. If you could let me know, Chair, when you can see this.
Okay, it's there, Reg.
Lovely, thank you. So hopefully everyone had a chance to look at the newsletter, but just to very quickly run through, we're in around week 42, about 127, and we've got about 400 contractors on site at the moment, and the pictures there just kind of give you a feel for the speed of the build now. I think most of the buildings are either coming out of the ground or are actually in quite a lot of advanced state. Particularly if you look at the house blocks there. So this is one of our first house blocks, and what's really good to note is the piling is completed now for the whole site, but in around July time we're expecting the first lot of risers to arrive. That's actually, believe it or not, quite an exciting time for us. What you actually see, the risers arrive, they are 4 stories high and are craned in from the top and just literally are dropped down into the riser cupboards themselves. Amazing thing to watch, and that's happening around July time. Precast has been absolutely phenomenal. 77% of precast has already been fabricated, and actually it's been brilliant. I mean, talk about lessons out of modern methods of construction. There's been some cracks that were identified early. They were all corrected. So if you imagine this was a normal build, we could have seen that repeated in the house blocks right across the board. So really good use of MMC. The breaking news there is you may already be aware that we have actually purchased Tigers Road. why just purchase land or purchase a site? Let's just purchase a road. And we did that with Tigers Road, and the reason for that was because it gives us some resilience in terms of the site for the operator in the future. We are in the process, if we haven't already, written to all of the occupants of Tigers Road to let them know what's going on, and obviously just allow, I mean, we're the main users at the moment, all the heavy traffic is us, so, and we would have to have repaired it anyway, so actually why not just buy it? So that's been the route there. In terms of materials, what we've now got is we have had some issues with steel because of the construction industry as general, as everybody might have been hearing, but generally speaking, we've let most of the contracts, etc. So Lendlease are doing a good job where that's concerned. And I just wanted to say is I note the invitation to a cuppa, which obviously we wouldn't be invited to, but I was going to suggest that maybe, Chair, at some point, we might like to invite this group to site to actually have a look at what we've been sharing for some time. Thanks, Les.
That would be really great. I think, yeah, we'd all appreciate that, I think.
Yeah, so leave it with us, given sort of obviously COVID, etc., but there's nothing to stop us start to look at some dates in the diary, etc. So unless there are any questions.
Oh, that's really good.
Les has got a question.
Les has got a physical hand up.
No, it's only my sort of standard one, right, and that is how are we getting on with small, medium-sized business employment and contracting, and have we got any feel for, and I appreciate it's pretty early days yet, how many reoffender programs we've tapped into for skills, works and skills on site?
So, Les, I don't know if you've managed to see the social values slide that was attached to the newsletter, but one of the reasons why we've put that in there now is it answers all of those questions. But one thing I did want to draw your attention to is that Crown House, who are one of the main contractors that Lendlease use, have actually held a meet the buyer kind of session with all local businesses, with a lot of the local businesses in Leicester, to try and actually help them in terms of actually gaining additional work. So that's actually the sort of thing that some of the major suppliers are actually doing as part of the build programme. But again, because of time, perhaps Les, if you want to sort of like drop me a separate line, we can give you specific answers to your question. Absolutely not a problem.
Yeah, that's great, Raz, because I have to confess I haven't looked at your dashboard this month, but I generally see it through.
It's doing very, very well.
Which route I find it, so it's probably Labour DC that I get it. But no, I personally, you know, with a slightly different hat on, I'm thrilled with the SME employment engagement. I think it's something you should be very proud of.
Thank you very much, Les. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, another one indicator I got questions, so I look forward to be my first ever visit to a prison, luckily. So yeah, we'll look forward to that. Right. On to item 16. So the date of the next meeting is scheduled for Friday, the 24th of September at 10 AM. Don't know whether we're staying Teams or virtual, but obviously or in person. So we'll just let you know as we go over the summer and see what happens. Just one other business from me, and as I said earlier, I appreciate some feedback about the structure of the agenda today. If you found it more useful to have those sections rather than just a sort of a free for all, just to give some guidance about how long to spend on each item. So appreciate some feedback in there, and just sort of as earlier mentioned, sort of training for community trigger, then I kind of picked up we probably need some training on prevent, and then we might need some training about the probation service and how that fits in. So just putting it out there, would it be useful for members to have some training sessions either every 6 months or just once a year, just to cover some of those key things that affect us within our local district? So I'll pick up with Gurjit sort of after the meeting, but some feedback from members if they feel that would be useful, whether we have a couple of mornings a year or something, just to go through these key issues that affect us within our districts, and probably what we need to know a little bit more to take back to our local area. So just I'll leave you with that thought for maybe next meeting, and we'll discuss it a bit further. But thank you all for joining us. Good to see you all, and I'm only a minute over, so I'm quite pleased with that. So thank you all for joining us, and I'll see you all soon. Take care. Bye.
Gemma, thank you, everyone.